Yogi Berra once said, "It's tough to make predictions, especially about the future." When it comes to these regulations or many other ones, nobody knows for sure what's going to happen. Probability is that they are going to restrict drivers to vaccinated only. But then what happens to the unvaccinated? And this is where I'm going to give a little bit of advice. Canada has gone through this type of situation before, albeit in a very small case. In 2003, the mad cow disease raged through Alberta. Well, if you call it rage, less than 6 cows, I guess, or something like that. BSE caused the United States to close the border to all livestock or cattle going into the states. And for initially, when they first announced it, a lot of drivers, operators parked their truck at home, waited for it's going to be a week or two or a month until everything gets ironed out. And it dragged on and on and on. In the end, it lasted for 3 years. Not one single cattle was crossed over into the United States for that amount of time. So what happened to the owner-operators or the drivers? They actually found different industries. Oil and gas industry, flat deck, reefer, whatever. They all got jobs and they got their equipment moving again. And that's a very limited, very isolated example of what can happen to a particular industry, but in this case, almost a whole country, as opposed to just an industry. Interestingly enough, after the borders were opened, they found that the majority of the prior bull haulers didn't return to the bull haul industry, at least initially. And they found that they were happy or happier at their new location. So what oftentimes can come across as a very, very negative, scary change, people can actually get used to it and actually end up liking the change. They might, and you never really know what options you have in that situation. The Canadian Trucking Alliance estimated 38,000 truck drivers will stop crossing the border. According to my estimations, that's 19%. I use 200,000 drivers. I think they now use 300,000 drivers, so my numbers might be a little bit off. But using my numbers, I still estimate that to be a little bit high. I actually wrote about it in Over the Road magazine, and my estimate is more along the lines of 10 to 12%. The difference isn't actually that material, considering that realistically any change of that type of supply from that many truck drivers crossing the border, even 5 or at most 7%, creates significant damage to the supply chain in Canada and somewhat even to the States. The question is not will it be damaged, but how much will it be damaged, and what is going to be affected and what's not going to be affected. If you add also the difficulties that our province of British Columbia is having right now, where they're isolated half of a province, actually, there are no roads or rails operating at capacity. That creates an additional supply chain issue, particularly because the vast majority of all of the freight coming in from China it comes through Vancouver, and that means that we're going to have very significant shortages of almost random stuff. So whether that's going to affect it a few weeks or months from British Columbia, or the effect of crossing into the United States, this entire, there was one article, the perfect storm of supply chain crashing. That's pretty much what we're going to end up being. So if at all possible, start stocking up on some essentials. It'll probably be a whole lot more than just toilet paper, probably not even toilet paper this time. But there's going to be a lot of things that we're used to that we're just not going to be able to get. As an example, I purchased a furnace for a sauna that I built this summer. And it's now on the dock in British Columbia. And as soon as I heard about the roads and rails, I just talked to the sales department, and I just told them, I said, you know what, give me a different make and model and brand from east as opposed to on the west coast. That is going to be something that's going to happen an awful lot. Certain makes, models, brands, entire, possibly even lines of product are not going to be available. One thing we do know that is going to probably happen or will happen is rates will increase. When you have that drop of supply, the demand is going to just increase the price. And that means freight rates are going to jump, specifically because drivers are not available. That means that wages will also increase. So whether you're vaccinated or unvaccinated, you have to ask the question, how is this going to affect you? Let's first deal with vaccinated drivers. You are more valuable than you've been in your prior career. And it is not because you're a better driver, it's just because you have a little card that allows you to cross over the border. And there's a lot of people who don't. And that means you are in demand. Already for the last month and a half or so, starting in October, carriers started frantically trying to hire vaccinated drivers to cross the border. So there's going to be a lot of demand, a lot of people recruiting, and you are the reason for it, and not you personally. It's primarily just the card that you carry. And that basically means that your value increases, so your rate should also increase. Now, some people may have some sensitive issues about asking for a raise. I'm going to be a little bit cautious here. The rate increase is not because the fuel cost increased or the equipment increased. It is because of a driver shortage, a serious driver shortage. And that means you are of high value. A vaccinated driver now can ask for a raise. To fairly pay people accordingly, it's probably best to just do a U.S. Bonus. That'll also help the drivers and operators to also determine what bonus they are getting. That's what I suggest. Whether carriers do that or not is, of course, irrelevant. Now, let's look at the unvaccinated drivers or operators. Let's specifically operators. The debt-laden operator who is unvaccinated and is not prepared to be vaccinated has the least amount of options of anybody. They can't park their truck on their driveway. If there's a whole bunch of people selling their trucks all at the same time, may not get the best price for it. They have the highest amount of losses. You can try and move the truck into Canada and haul Canadian freight only, but more than likely it's not going to be paying as much as the U.S. freight. So you have to be very sensitive to what your break-even costs are. So it's going to be very tough for a debt-laden operator who is unvaccinated. A debt-free unvaccinated has a lot more options. They can park their truck on their driveway, wait for 3 months, 6 months, a year. Maybe things will turn around in a year. Maybe they won't. but he doesn't have to sell his truck at a low price. He can just park it. So there's a fair bit of options for a debt-free operator. Those are primarily the options that drivers and operators have. I'm going to give a couple of words here on carriers. There will be carriers that go bankrupt in this, and it's not necessarily because they were horrendously, terribly managed or anything like that. It has to do with the pure vaccinated versus unvaccinated mix that they have in their fleet. And however many they can attract or not attract or lose, it can cause a carrier to financially become insolvent very, very quickly. So be careful when you're looking for operators or for carriers to put your truck onto. I'm going to tell you a story a number of years ago. This was a number of years ago. A carrier, an operator who was at a carrier came to me and says, "Hey, by the way, this company is doing really good. They just signed everybody all up and gave a 20-cent per mile rate increase to their owner-operators." And I said, "Wow, 20% or 20 cents, that's a huge amount." I said, what happened? Did they change their clientele, the new customers? Are they hauling different freight? No, there wasn't any of that. New equipment, new management, were they bought out by somebody else? No, nothing changed whatsoever in the company. And then I said, flag went up, and I said, okay, now in this situation, tell me what happened. Why are they doing this? Well, they want to get away from all of their company drivers, and they want to go to only independent operators. I said, so they're getting rid of their company drivers and company trucks and all into owner-operators. I said, flag, what they're doing is moving their liabilities from secured to unsecured. They're preparing for bankruptcy. And the guy says, what, really? You're kidding. I said, no, be very, very wary. I said, either don't move there or find another carrier or whatever, because that is a bad flag to see when a carrier moves their entire fleet over to independent operators. It's not a 100% indicator that they're going bankrupt, but it's a flag anyway. Sure enough, 6 months later, the company declared bankruptcy and closed their doors, and all of the independent operators who moved over, they lost their wages for that month or 2 months or whatever in that regards. It was very, very a tough situation. The bankruptcies and the successes will not be logical based. It will be purely supply and demand. It'll be feast and famine. And so the entire carrier industry is going to be fluctuating up and down as capacity is being shifted around. I'd like to thank Over the Road magazine for their support and passion for the industry. I wrote an article in December 2021 specifically about this topic, and by all means go online and you can read it. I trust in human ability to adjust, and I think that we are all going to be okay on this, but it may take several years. There are going to be some fatalities. There are going to be some people who lose 5-10 years working and saving, but for the most part, the industry is going to survive. And I hope and I pray that we all remain calm as we can and make the most reasonable choices in our situations. Have a good trip.